And welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And we have Tim Alexander here, our historian and geopolitical analyst. And, of course, he's an uber Christian like me. And we call a spade, which, again, as I say, if you don't want to know the truth, or if you're aggravated, it's because you have, as I say, the degree of aggravation is the desire to believe a lie leaving your body. How's that? So, right. Tim, the fact is we have to be witnesses for the Most High God. We have to be truth tellers. If there's Christians out there and they don't believe that they should confront people, even if it can make them lose their job or disrupt their relationship with their husband, wife, their family, or if they put other people first before God, the definition is Jesus said, if you are not willing to, quote, leave your family, et cetera, et cetera. And what he's saying, not talking about abandoning your family, he's saying you have to put God first. And when we look at the issues of the candidacy of GOP candidates that are basically liars like Ted Cruz, who don't deserve to be in a position to have fancy speeches, or another Cuban refugee to America, Mark Rubio, we have people that are speaking out. The only candidate I can support is Rand Paul, and I know people some get aggravated about the fact that he supports Israel, but I guarantee you, as we said in the first hour with Tex Mars, he's not going to be kissing Israel's butt. What will happen is Israel, like any other country, will be just like his father, Ron Paul, be put in a position where America is not going to be becoming the dog being wagged by the tail of the state of it's a real hell. What will happen is we should really annex the state of Israel, make certain it doesn't get partitioned into another Muslim aggravating state called Palestine. Those people should have been moved to Jordan where they belong. And we should make certain we, what I call, disembowel the Muslim extremists, which, by the way, right now the Obama administration is supporting. We know Benghazi was a perfect example of Stevens being an arms dealer. And the reason why he got killed is he tried to get man-pats back from the Libyan militia and these maniac killers. And they decided to go after the compound where he was at. And that's why Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration didn't call in for a backup support, which they had many hours to do so. So that's come out. And I'm going to have the author of the latest update on what happened in Benghazi. I have my own regular and classified sources that Hillary Clinton is the least candidate that should have the right to even open her darn mouth or run for president.
Oh, you're just picking on Hillary.
Yeah, Hillary. I call. We do not need a 16-foot.
Right, Satan.
We don't need
one of the best witches we have.
Exactly. We don't need a 16-foot Draco reptilian monstrosity avataring a decrepit.
Yeah, you know, the problem is,
female.
Dr. Bell, that most of the people running on either party are, I'll put it nicely, dirtbags.
But I don't think Rand Paul is.
I
think that Rand Paul is our quintessential candidate. That is maybe one of our last chances to have a constitutional government that puts
maybe
the unborn baby first.
I've always liked his dad, not 100%. I did not like it when he went over to Israel and kissed their butts.
He's not kissing their butts. Let me qualify this. Let me qualify it before you go off into Tim Alexander rant. And I'm going to make this very clear for people, okay? I don't support the maniacs and it's a real hell, but even it's like having a bad relative at your party. They're still your relative. They're your cousin that you regret coming to the barbecue, but you're still your darn cousin. Now, when they do something bad, you grab them by the neck, pull them aside and say, you're not going to say that at the barbecue. You're not going to behave in this manner. You're not going to get drunk and start getting disorderly or trying to punch people out. Because if you do, I'm going to hog tie and duck tie you and stick you in the garage. Okay?
Well, and I've often felt that way. I mean, I've at times have been a supporter of Israel. I want Israel to live in peace.
We have to unequivocally support them in this way. We need to, number one, annex the state so that the Joint Chiefs is in total control of their military. The Israelis are out of control. They're out of control. And not only that, they pass off intelligence information directly to China and Russia and our potential enemies. And they're supporting the state of it's a real hell. You've already said it. Baghdadi is an Israeli Mossad actor. And, of course, we're, by the way, doing it, too.
Let me read to you. I just posted this in artwork on my blog. This is from a diatribe in Fink's Bar that the Defense Intelligence Agency recorded secretly from Netanyahu. It was way back in 1990. And this is only about 2 paragraphs long. It's not very long. Let me quote. If we get caught, they will just replace us with persons of the same cloth. So it does not matter what you do. America is a golden calf. We will suck it dry, chop it up, and sell off piece by piece until there is nothing left but the world's biggest welfare state that we will create and control. Why? Because it is the will of God, and America is big enough to take the hit, so we can do it again and again and again. This is what we do to countries that we hate. We destroy them very slowly and make them suffer for refusing to be our slaves, end quote. Now, that's right. Benjamin Netanyahu.
Right. Now, that, by the way, is the attitude of Sabbatean Satanistic Jews that think that we are their golem, that we're soulless dogs, we aren't really humans. And by the way, the word human means serpent man in Welsh. People need to grasp this. They may think, well, that's just your opinion. No, it's not. You need to get a handle on this, people out there. Every other host on every other network.
We are the superpower.
Let me finish, Tim.
Not.
Let me finish. Every other host and every other radio show and every other network tries to be nice. I'm not nice. I will smack you up the side of the head with the truth, and I expect you to respond. And if you don't like it, come back in and call in and say, I disagree, and this is why, and do it in a mannerly way. Not an ad hominem attack, but in a logical way to say why I'm full of it. Guess what? I don't get takers because they know they don't have the truth, and we do. The fact is now, once we have the truth, we need to start talking about what are we going to do about it. Are we as Christians, if even 5% of so-called 78% of Christians in America, our population in America out of 325 million, not 320, say they're Christians, why is any one of them supporting either a bad candidate in the Republican Party or any candidate in the Democratic Party? Any candidate. Because the Democratic Party is thoroughly demonic. They should call it the Democratic Party. That's what it is. And I call the Republican Party the Reprobate Party. Because many of them in the party, like Mr. Boehner, he has no business being in politics at all. This man is a total turncoat, sneaky, snake in the grass. That's what he is.
And I thought that was required to be in politics.
No, there are good politicians. I think Rand Paul is a good candidate that would actually do something. The danger is the intensity of attacks against him right now. They had two info babes just try to rip right through him, and they're such mental midgets compared to remember, he's an eye surgeon, trying to tear him apart, and he was trying to be gentlemanly, and they continued to interrupt him in a very unmanly fashion on TV. Then they said he was picking on women because he wouldn't allow them to do ridiculous attacks and wouldn't let him get a word in edgewise to answer their questions. And they wouldn't present him with a question he could answer with a dialogue. No, they didn't want dialogue. They wanted to rant in his face and wanted him to say, I dare you to kind of say I'm being dismannerly by saying things back to me. And then they tried to accuse him of attacking, quote, women. I mean, this is just freaking ridiculous. And I'm so sick of someone who's a Christian pro-life person like Mr. Rand Paul, Dr. Rand Paul, being treated by abuse by this. And I guarantee you that there's a lot more Ron Paul and Rand Paul than people realize. When he gets into position, he won't be in foreign entanglements and crazy situations like with the state. It's a real hell. They'll be shackled by us. They won't be doing things where they're dialoguing with the Russians from a position of weakness. We'll deal with the Russians and Chinese and these other foreign powers with strength, not weakness. We'll deal with them with respect.
It's not that I disagree with you, because I really ultimately don't. My problem with the voting in this country is we use voting machines, and I've got an article I linked just a few minutes ago.
The voting machines can only swing the vote a maximum of 7%. So if enough people come out, that 7% will be swamped. And the fact is, there's enough states where there's backup ways of checking the vote that if we get more than 7% of the population that they can swing using voting machines and fraud, then we'll still get the president we want. And again, our God is God, and if people stand up and pray for our nation, like they did when the nation of America was made by Christians, it was Christians that made this nation. 3% of the population supported the revolution, not 97%, 3%. And it was people like yourself and your ancestors, Tim, that because they sacrificed their physical substance and put their life on the line, that we have in America. The only republic, the only system of government that God blesses on earth is a republic, not a demon. And welcome back, Tim. So let's get into some of the news. We've got lots of, as they say, people say, oh, you're so negative. I mean, one of the things that I hear people say is that it's abusive to tell them all the bad news. And this is, by the way, relatives, friends, colleagues. All this bad news, you've got to be psychotic. You've got to be crazy. That's one of the terms that's so overused.
Yeah, but look, what
crazy.
you and I and the alternative media are doing is trying to tell the truth. And I'm sorry, the truth is the truth, and often it is negative because people are living in a artificial matrix that the mainstream media is creating. You have 6 corporations owned by the globalists, all run by Zionists, that control over 96% of America's mainstream news media. And, you know, it used to be a whole lot more companies than that, but now it's 6. And I mean, if you listen to them, we're in a recovery. Unemployment is 5.6% or something. The reality is, one, we're not in a recovery. We're in an economic depression and have been since 2008. We have about 105 million, depending on which figure you want to quote, 93 to 105 million Americans of working age completely without jobs, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the dichotomy, the difference between reality and the lies the propaganda matrix is telling us is dramatic. So yes, sometimes when we tell you stuff, it is negative because they're telling you sweet, fluffy lies, and we're telling you the truth, and the truth often is not all that wonderful, but it's the truth. I'm not here to lie to people. I have to answer to God, and you know, if I tell several million people on your show a big whopper, that's not just telling one person a whopper. That's a lie times millions, and I don't think the Lord will probably appreciate that, and I will have to answer for everything I've done. So I try very hard to speak God's truth. You know, Jesus said his Father won't stand a lying tongue in his house.
Well, you know, which is why I consider you part of what I call the best way is not the warrior class. I call it the sheepdog class. You and I are sheepdogs. We're sheepdogs for God. We bite and suffocate wolves. We will protect the sheep so they don't get too close to the cliff, and if there's a big hole, they won't get their leg broken in it. We try to make sure that they're all back in the pen so that at night we can kind of wolf around and smell, see if there's a wild animal ready to eat our sheep. And we don't like the sheep to, you know, do stupid things, you know, rub up against a cactus with spurs on it or do something that's going to harm them. We're sheepdogs for God, and we're basically fearless. You and I don't really care because we know we're going to end up dead someday. We may end up dead either in enigmity or in glory. And glory means we're going to do God's will right to the last molecule of oxygen leaves our mitochondria. That's it. People may or may not like that. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, can we get some of the news here real quick before we run out? Putkin, he has been defending his delivery of the S-300 air defense system. He's saying this is not an offensive weapon system. This is purely defensive. Netanyahu phoned him and evidently was having his usual fit. Now, what the Iranians are getting, and I strongly suspect that before the announcement was made public, the first system was already en route via air. But they're getting kind of the S-300 plus. It's the very latest S-300 system. It's almost an S-400 system. It will make the cost of any attack on Iran by either Saudi Arabia or NATO forces extremely painful, extremely costly to the attackers. Now, all air defense systems, even the best, can be overwhelmed with sufficient numbers, but that means that you lose a lot of missiles, a lot of cruise missiles, and you lose a lot of aircraft. The S-300 will even take on stealth fighters like the F-22. It's a really, really good system, and the S-400 is even better. So, you know, that has changed the equation somewhat in the Middle East, although, you know, a lot of people expected that to happen. So, anyway, That's one change. Iran is urging China, Russia, and India to counter the NATO missile systems. And you see every day, every week, more and more movements of alliance, the Russian, Iran, China, Belarus, probably India and Pakistan, although they're enemies, combining into an alliance, and then the NATO with Australia, Japan thrown in for good measures. And this is what happens before you have a massive war, and this goes back to the Napoleonic Wars, the First World War, and the Second World War. And it's clearly, and if you look at the propaganda matrix, the mainstream news media, we're clearly being fed psychological conditioning to prepare us and to get us to want the Third World War. And all these stories about the Islamic nuts, and there are plenty of them, but some are fake, some are real, but this is a psyop for us to demand, we got to stop this ISIS. The reality is ISIS was organized and funded and founded and is still controlled by the CIA, which is largely controlled by the Rothschild Empire, and the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad. al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, his real name is Simon Elliott. He is an Israeli Jewish actor. His parents are Jewish. They live in Israel. And he was trained by the Mossad to be able to speak like and act like an Islamic extremist. We are being set up for the clash of civilizations between the Christians and the Islamic extremists. And this is the conditioning, the psychological conditioning that we're being fed through the matrix right now.
Right.
Now, I have an article I also posted today on satellite killers being a key Chinese kind of secret weapon system. Part of what the elite have been told by their demonic overlords is, we have all these underground cities and bases available to you, and we'll be able to engineer. We have technology that will allow us to de-radioactive a large part of the world. Well, it all is dependent on satellites, and the one thing that the Russians and the Chinese have made a lot of investment in is the ability to take out any and all satellites.
Exactly. Welcome back, and we have Chris Harris. Chris, you've got some news about a robot. What happened to this robot? It wasn't a Star Wars robot, by the way. It went to the Fukushima Daiichi plant area, and how long did it take for this robot to die of the neutron flux and the swirling mass of electrons in these in this area because of the beta particle emissions and the high levels of radiation coming off, high energy particle or radiation coming off that destroyed the integrated circuit and fried its little so-called silicon chip brain? How long did it take to kill it?
Not very long. It only went 10 meters before it lost mobility.
Okay.
But, this is an interesting... Well, what you're talking about is something also it's high temperatures and steam and everything else. It's not going to be very easy.
It's all doable.
They're calling decommissioning.
Okay, let me give you a technical solution to this that'll help to solve the problem. Firstly, you actuate what's called actuated sensors that are basically called force vector multipliers in the arms of a robot. The robot's made of depleted uranium and a thing called titanium steel antimony alloy, so it's super strong, like the stuff they use for making rocket engines. The cables would all be made of this alloy covered by depleted uranium in what's called integrated cup sheets, which basically mean you can turn it and move it. And you could have what's called director arms every so many inches or centimeters, if you want to call it. You could actually move the cable remotely at a distance. The way you move it is they're all hydraulic, and instead of putting a camera system, which would get fried, you put fiber optic cables. And you could have also fiber optic lights. You could actually light your way with some of the cables and actually see with the others. And then if you want to put a remote brain, you put the remote brain in a depleted uranium case. It's created a thing called a mu metal box that'll actually block the electron flux, and the depleted uranium will block the gamma rays, so it won't fry the circuit. And the circuit board will be made with a IEEE chip from Atmel Corporation. Now, if you're an engineer listening and you think you can't do this and it'll be 200 years, you're full of it. And there is not a technical problem, geopolitical, spiritual, or otherwise, that I will not tackle on any issue, health, science, engineering, welding, anything on any area on this planet that I will not tackle. If I don't have the answers, I will come back and get an answer for you. So if you say you can't stop the radiation, I'm going to bring on a whole series of articles published and printed and actually patented to get rid of nuclear waste even in the vast oceans of the Pacific. We have the technology now. It's not a future thing that's going to happen in 200 or 1,000 years. We have it now. It's on the patent books. So when people say this crap, I want to just vomit. I'm so sick and tired of people saying, and the reason why they put this robot in there is to make sure it died, so that they can say, see how incompetent we are? We can't solve it. Oh, sorry. Do you know the money that TIPCO's making? They're making more money now than they ever did before, and none of it's going into fixing the problem or remediating or getting a panel of super scientists.
Dr. Bill, we've had hardened systems for decades for nuclear warfighting.
Well, we have hardened robots that actually go into space orbit that can go on asteroids now. You know, the next big industry in the future will be what's called asteroid mining, where you put up an asteroid system in space, and these asteroids, some of them have massive amounts of really rare minerals for high-tech equipment, gold, all kinds of things like that. Asteroid mining is going to be one of the super industries of the rest of the century. Okay, and we already have the hardened asteroid robots. They can work in deep space. They get exposed to cosmic and background extra radiation. So when I hear this, they don't want to pop out of Warehouse 13, their fancy stuff. They don't want to talk about stuff we make at Atmel Corporation already, the IEEE chip that's EMP proof. You don't want to talk about how to stop the mu metal box, the electron flux of beta particle emission. They don't want to talk about subatomic particle shattering and changing the T1 half of radioisotopes so they can clean the radiation from the Pacific Ocean and stop the biospheres from dying. So when I hear this stuff from minor minds that say that it can't be done, when I don't know, you know what I do? I get on my face before the Most High God and I cry out in sackcloth and ashes and say, God, you better show up now. I don't dial God and say, hey, God, I wish you liked us and so on. I say, God, I'm your child. I demand you show up. So when people say you can't get angry with God, it says be angry but sin not. In other words, you can be angry, you can be demanding, and you can know. And when you know God takes you seriously, when you act that way, if you're sick and dying of cancer, if your finances are shot, if your husband or wife has left you, if your child is into drugs, you have to get an attitude toward God. And that attitude will be one of worship, which means you respect that He is an absolute authority on everything, scientific, technical, personal, and otherwise, and He knows everything from before it even happens, and He always has solutions. So when people say you can't do this and you can't do that and we have to suffer and the biosphere is dying and it's over, no. That's what Satan wants you to believe. It's a lie. Serious, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, Chris, this situation with Fukushima Daiichi, the amount of radiation released since January is astronomical. And what do you think is going to happen in your view? Because we're going to get Dana Durnford back. He's just finishing the last of his tours. He's been on Jeff Rentz's network a number of times, but I'm going to get him back because I have a background in marine oceanography. I'm going to ask him some very serious questions that are much more technical than Jeff or anybody else can ask. So when people say that when it gets back up on E&E News, it'll say, Deagle said this, and it actually has some veracity. We are seeing a biospheric omnicide of the oceans. We're going to start seeing the top of the tree style on the Pacific Northwest. We're going to see most of the birds of carrion and insects along the coastal regions and the intertidal region die. We're going to start seeing biological effects in human beings. It'll seem subtle at first, but they'll develop what I call CNS zombie syndrome, peripheral neuropathy, cesium toxicity causing cardiac arrhythmias and other problems. We're going to see the mitochondrial apocalypse. It's going to start accelerating aging in a vast range of the population. If those are weak or have any predisposition to an illness, it's going to bring that condition to the surface very quickly, so they're going to see the elderly die like flies, and the young become small for dates, or develop all kinds of health issues that you otherwise should say, how did this happen? Well, numbskulls out there that won't say, they'll say, oh, it's global warming, it's a pathogen in the oceans, it's this. Listen, you lying piece of scientific, human fecal matter, and that's the nicest thing I can say about them. You need to take your license or your so-called credentials, and you need to shred it or use it in the bathroom for wiping your posterior, because that's how useful it is to you. You need to stop pretending that you're a scientist when you're working for a government agency or a corporation, or you say you belong to a group like the Scientists for Social Responsibility or like our medical doctors and you won't speak out. You are a blight on the human race, and 1,000 years or 10,000 years from now, programs like this that tell the truth and E&E News that prints out the truth, they will be considered scripture 1,000 or 10,000 years from now, because if we don't remember these things, their future people will die as well. They need to remember this should be written in stone, just like after the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not. And I'm going to make a series of commandments. Thou shalt not do anything unless they consult thy Most High God. That's the first commandment. Thou shalt not worship other gods and Masonic organizations or sit any other so-called pseudo-religion before me. Thou shalt honor thy. Thou shalt keep the Sabbath day holy. Thou shalt honor thy wise people in their civilization, including thy mother and thy father, if they show godly wisdom. Thou shalt not kill not even the fetus in utero, but the elderly, because of your healthcare system. Thou shalt not destroy the biosphere. Thou shalt not create genetically modified organisms that modify the human race or any other species that destroys the biological diversity in the web of life. I'm going to go down through and create a series of what I call commandments for the 21st century that follow the 10 commandments of my ancestor Moses. I am so sick of liars and gutless people that won't tell the truth and say our world is dying. It's not going to die. It's not, that's a prophecy of a future time. No, I almost sounded like Captain James T. Kirk. No, this is right now. This is the big show, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a lot of sea mammals washing up all.
And Tim, we're back with more news. Tim, when we're looking at things like the announcement of the candidacy of Hitler, rotten Clinton, the wicked witch of the West, cackling when Muammar Gaddafi gets a steel rod shoved up inside him, he's impaled and dies a horrible death in the back of a truck. Good for him. And then we have...
I keep telling you, Hillary's going to save his country a lot of money. She can mothball Air Force One and fly Broomstick One.
Yeah, I know you said that one before. It's a good joke, so you're going to keep using it, Tim. I know.
Well, I hope somebody tells it.
It's like my mother when she used to make the joke. She says, she had people who talked to her. She said, I can't hear you. And she said, why? She said, because my hearing aid is in my purse. Same guy.
Slick Willie, her husband, was one of these people that had such a engaging smile and so forth. He fooled a lot of people, but I don't think Hillary has that. I think a lot of people see Hillary.
She's engaging, all right. She's engaging.
Some people, the devil himself could come down and he'd tell them he was an angel of light, and they'd believe him.
Well, I think that Hillary could engage a legion of demons at the Gadareans, but I don't think she can engage human beings that have more sense.
Well, I mean, I of course, I do from word one, him and her. It was interesting. When I shook their hands, Bill was coming through first, and of course, Secret Service is all around. And I was one person in this receiving line that wasn't beaming because he was governor and he was running for president, and I thought, this guy is just really bad news. And he saw that my face wasn't beaming, and his complexion, everything changed only for a second or two. And then when he went to the person on the other side of me, he was beaming again. He's extremely perceptive. I didn't see that in Hillary, but I just she's an extraordinarily evil person. But I think her husband is too. I mean,
he is, but he's just a little sneakier. As I say, he's the kind of guy that can take a leap.
He's kind of like Tony Blair in the UK. Yeah. That fake smile, We have, at the highest levels in the United States, some of the worst trash imaginable, and it's that way by design, because they. When I say they, the globalist and their Zionist allies, and they're using the Jewish people something terrible. They have the resources. To anybody moving on the political scene, they begin putting dossiers together on you. When I was 21, I won nomination for state representative in Indiana, and I was told that there was a dossier put together on me, and I'm thinking, I'm 21 years old, I'm a college student. Granted, I was the youngest person in Indiana to ever be nominated, but, that's what they do. And you don't move up the political ladder unless you've got baggage. Rare exception does. For instance, people that are nominated to be a lifetime federal judge, either a district court judge or the Court of Appeals, the FBI does background checks, really in-depth background checks on them. The ones that are approved and get the FBI approval and then go through the congressional or the Senate hearings, those are the ones that have dirt, and they have dirt on them. The squeaky clean ones, they manage to find a reason to exclude them because they don't own them. They want to own everybody in Washington, and if they can't bribe you, they want to be able to blackmail you.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it?
There are a few that manage to get outside of that box.
Yeah,
but
Tim, we got a couple of minutes left here. I want you to highlight any other news items you think are important on your blog today. What other major items do you see?
Well, the Ukraine's junta state news agency basically is hoping for a new world war.
What? I mean, when you hear this stuff, you say people just kind of blank out and say, "Nah, you people are nuts. There's not going to be a war." Just like, it's like the same people in Germany, the nice people of Middle Europe, who thought there's no way after World War I we're going to do this again, even worse. But they did.
Yeah.
And they didn't see it coming, even with slapping him right in the face. They looked at it and say, nah, no, Adolf Hitler's not going to rise and become a dictator. When he was doing the Kristallnacht and the grabbing the guns in 1933, no, Hitler's a good guy. He's brought the economy back. He's fighting the Treaty of Versailles that was set up to crush the German people. No, Hitler's a good guy. Adolf, he's our buddy. In fact, he was on the front of Time magazine, I think was in the 30s.
Sure.
As the man of the year.
Won fourth Rothschild, but they didn't tell you that, did they?
Yeah.
Adolf did his job, and then he retired to Argentina. Right. Adolf got the world in another blood orgy for Satan that the right people at the top made oodles and gobs of money off of. In fact, the Second World War was so profitable. I mean, they had to, within 5 years, they had to go into a Cold War to keep the money flowing, but it was still nothing quite like World War II. And these same people and their sons, they want another deal like that because they made so much money. This time, though, the technology of human slaughter simply, it's not going to be World War II. It's going to be probably over quicker. I'm preparing some videos, and I'm going to do a series of videos on World War III and different war theaters and some of the weapon systems and some of the things that are apt to happen in those theaters, like the Middle East, Europe, North America, etc.
Right. Now, of course, the Russians have put the S-300 system in Iran. They said because of the war-torn situation in Yemen, which basically is attacking an ally to the Iranians. And Russia basically said this is totally defensive.
Yemen is a mess. I mean, the kind of anti-Western power, quasi-pro-Iranian power, the president president was in until about a year ago and was overthrown. Then the West, the Saudis, got their man in, and he was overthrown in pretty much a popular revolution. These guys, to call him president is, you might as well call him dictator for life, as long as they live. I mean, Yemen does not exactly have participatory democracy. It's a real mess, and of course, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and all of us have made it much worse. It's a proxy war. What we're seeing right now on the military, and the one thing I agree with Pope Francis on is we are in the Third World War. It's piecemeal. And as far as major military engagements, what we're seeing are proxy wars. Just as right before the Second World War,
the reason why he's saying that is that
Spain.
Tim, think of it this way. The globalists want to have a new world order with the marriage of the BRICS nations, celebrated by the marriage of Princess Obama and Prince Vladimir I of Russia. And the presiding priest of that hellish ceremony will be none other than the Pope, with a new world order and a new world religion, which is coming quickly because the United Nations has called for it and recommended that the Pope is the ideal person, we call the rock star of super religions, that will actually bring forward a new world religion that will bring all the Abrahamic religions. That's why he's had, right above Bethlehem over a year ago, he had a special ceremony kind of celebrating a conclave between the Muslim imams, Greek Orthodox, and Catholic priests, all doing ceremonies to so-called, the quote, same Abrahamic God, when it's a bull-faced lie. If he's academic, he knows well.
The Orthodox didn't celebrate a divine liturgy with him. They won't.
No, they won't. But here's what I think is going to happen. I think that we are within months of a military catastrophe in the Middle East, and the very first thing, and I'm not sure when it'll happen, but when you see them close the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Aden, which is going to happen real soon, when you see a peace treaty where they divide the city of Jerusalem and the state of Israel hell, I call it, it's a real hell. When you see these things happen and you see a president ratifying a treaty and going to the newly temple, which might just be a tabernacle of Moses because they can erect it overnight before they have the physical building built of a stone-based temple, you know you're watching the Antichrist, you're watching the false prophet who's presiding over it as a false pope. You're seeing the coming together of a new world order and a world religion system to crush everyone on earth, to say it's not just what you do, we're not even going to let you think anything other than what we say.
But remember, Christ himself is coming back.
So the news break.